speaking. I'm going to read part of her introduction because otherwise I'd take up the whole time. She's got a lot of credits and things. So it says here that Charlotte Penn's first book of poems, Many Small Faces, through Black Lawrence Press, received an Indie AV Book of the Year award from Forward Reviews. The book explains her father's chronic homelessness while simultaneously detailing the psychological changes that enables humans to form cities, communities, and households. She is also the author of 2 award-winning poetry chapbooks and the editor of the Poetics. Is that right?
Poetics.
I didn't think I was going to hear that word today. Poetics of American Song Lyrics. Her poetry, fiction, and creative nonfiction have recently been published in Harvard Review, Swanee Review, Southern Review, and Brevity. In August of 2017, she became the director of the Stroke Center for Creative Writing and director of the Creative Writing Program at University of South Alabama, which we are at today. So she's going to speak today. I'm going to assist her, hopefully, with her PowerPoint presentation. And so we have not rehearsed this, so like all live events, it could get touchy. And anyway, so why don't we give her a warm Hester welcome. And then we have like 10 seconds of dead space.
Well, it's great to be here. Gosh, I did such a large crowd. You guys are kind of happening. This is a really great place. Now, can everybody hear me in the back? Sonia, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Because this microphone's going to slide it down. Okay, I'm going to go over there and just quickly turn on my little computer. Give me a second. I'll wake it back up. So before we start talking today about one of my favorite, I guess, techniques to use in writing, the image, I just wanted to say just quickly, I'm the director of the Stokes Center for Creative Writing over there at not Strokes, that's different, at the University of South Alabama, and we have a national reading series. We not local, so just wanted to say that up front. We bring in writers that wouldn't have the opportunity to come here otherwise. And so our next reading is going to be February 12th, and it's Jamie Quattro, who she's been described as like a more modern Flannery O'Connor who writes a lot about adultery. So that should be fun for Valentine's Day. But I brought little wrap cards that tell you our reading series, and so please feel free to grab those. I brought some other swag, some pens, and stickers. Our slogan at the English department is, "We have the best words." So yeah, and there's always a word that's kind of insulting on one of our bumper stickers over there. All right, so let's talk about the image. So I'm primarily a poet. I also do creative nonfiction. I also do like that book on song lyrics that tends to be more academic, but at the center of whatever, and I do write some fiction too, at the center of whatever I do, to get people engaged, it's going to come down to 2 things, and you all know these 2 things, the detail and the image, right? And these are slightly different techniques, but these are the 2 things that, as I was preparing this for today, I was thinking, the writers in this group, they're going to know a lot of what I'm saying, but it's just so good to sometimes be reminded, right? Whenever I'm teaching my intro to creative writing classes, I like to get back to what Natalie Goldberg says, beginner's mind. Just you have to keep returning to these basics sometimes. So, Liberty and Labradors is the title of this talk, because these are 2 very different things, right? Liberty is an abstraction. Labrador might be one of the greatest images for just this freedom to romp and play and go in the water and just cause all sorts of wonderful chaos. But this is the basis of what we do, always trying to balance those abstractions with those specifics. So let's start off here looking at this quote. It says, a poem is an event, not the record of an event. This is from Robert Lowell. A poem is an event, not the record of an event. So what do you think Robert Lowell was trying to get at with this idea? Anybody want to take a guess? Yeah.
Well, it's the event that's starting to become more universal. It's not the literal event. It's become more of a perhaps slightly fictionalized event based on something real.
Okay. Well, I love that. That's good. That's good. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think, you know the painting of the French painting of, it's of a pipe in an ashtray, but the title is, "This is not a pipe."
Like this is a
This
representation.
is a painting of the pipe. Is that what you're talking about there, sort of?
You know, it's interesting. How I'm looking at it is a poem is an event in itself. That when we are going to any piece of literature, what we are wanting is to experience something, right? We don't want to be told about something. We don't want a record of it. We want to feel that, be there, be in the moment. And I think especially with poetry, this is an aside, people always are trying to deduce it to that paraphrasable summary. I could really get off track on that forever, so I'll stop it now. But the idea is that what you want to do with any piece of writing, does not matter the genre, you want to give an experience, right? So the next slide here, this is an experience, skydiving. This experience would scare the heck out of me, but some people love it, right? Because it is different. It is not the everyday. You get that adrenaline flow. You see things from a new perspective. Way up high as your body's going right, crashing toward the ground. But you are getting a different experience, right? So this would be like one of adrenaline. The next slide, this would be fear. We pay so much money to go see horror movies, right? People who are so sweet and kind and bake cookies for new neighbors will still go and pay money to see someone hack each other with saws at the movie theater, right? And why do we do this? We like the experience of being scared, right? It's an experience. The next slide here, this is another experience. Oro sensation is the technical name, and that's something we all know very well, just how good it feels when we eat something like French fries. Oro sensation is something that marketing companies spend so much money on, trying to get the exact right balance of salt, fat, sweet, and also the right texture. French fries supposedly are the height of our creations here, because you got that little crunch. People have studied this, I love it. You get the little crunch of the French fry, and then you go to the soft pillow inside. You get those salt crystals, the potato's a little sweet. It does it all. It's a sensation. It is an experience. You don't want someone just to tell you about the French fries. You want the French fries. And then this other experience right here. Next slide, please. Yeah, we're doing a good job together. This is something that's happening tomorrow in Mobile, a marathon, right? That experience of having your goal achieved. So all of this is what we are trying to recreate in writing. And we know this, you know this, but it's always difficult to how. How do you give people this intense experience that they're wanting, that they're, you know, the marathon, Darth Vader, you know, these don't happen every day, right? So when you go to literature, you're wanting to have an experience. So, in the next slide, this is from Kevin Clark. I should move over here to read it. The trick is to make sure your reader is also transported by your words, and not just you. He's talking about poems here, but that's okay. You can put in fiction. Poems aren't secrets. They're intense, compacted moments of communication with a reader. And the best poems move people by animating the imagination. Readers want to be carried into a different reality. They want to feel, to react emotionally. Boredom is their enemy and yours, right? You cannot bore your reader. So move on. So the next slide. How do you create it? I think you guys know it. Next slide here. These two basics that we have, right? So you know these things. Imagery, I'm not so good behind podium. Imagery, the mental picture, but it doesn't have to be, it doesn't just always have to be a visual. It can also be a sound, an image of a particular sound, right?
Grab the mic out of the.
Oh, that's a great idea. Thank you. Yeah, so imagery doesn't have to just be, we often think of it as a visual. But it can, we all know that there are certain sounds that call upon us, right? Like that sound of your grandmother's door. There's that certain creak of her door, right? Or the certain sound of your dog's tail wagging as you come in, right? We know those intimately. So an image can also be anything connected with the senses. Sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch. And then specificity is that other weapon that we have. And we're always having to push ourselves. Don't just say tree, of course. Again, you know this. Just reminding ourselves of the basic, but it's maple. And it's not just a dog, it's a Labrador, right? So here's a good example of an image. And this is one that's bringing up more of sound. This is from Michael Ondanji's Sweet Like a Crow. Your voice sounds like a scorpion being pushed through a glass tube. That's not nice. It's great though. That's exactly that sort of, you feel that, you cringe a little bit. Much better than saying she had an annoying voice. Much better than that. The scorpion being pushed through the glass tube. You can imagine the pincher of the scorpion just scraping against the glass as it goes. All right, the next example here. This is from Emily Dickinson. My life had stood a loaded gun. I'm not even, when you first see that line, you might be like, what is she talking about? I often have that feeling with Emily Dickinson. But you know instantly, this isn't pleasant, right? On some base level, you're getting, this sounds a little frightening. This sounds like someone kind of on the edge. She's not saying, I'm teetering between life and death. She's saying, my life stood before me like it's a loaded gun. This is much more menacing, right? And she's giving us this image of life as a loaded gun. I mean, we can't forget that she's living through the Civil War, the Revolutionary. Sorry, I was right the first time. Civil War. So this is very much a part of her every day, seeing the boys in the town leave and not come back home. My life had stood a loaded gun. Okay, next one we got. One of my favorite books, Peter Pan. How many people in here have read Peter Pan? Oh, yeah. It's so whimsical and just, it's so much better than any of the movie recreations of it. So this is describing the mother, Wendy's mother. She was a lovely lady with a romantic mind and such a sweet, mocking mouth. Her romantic mind was like the tiny boxes, one within the other that came from the puzzling East. However many you discover, there was always one more. And her sweet, mocking mouth had one kiss on it that Wendy could never get, though there it was, perfectly conspicuous, in the right-hand corner. I love this image. It gives you so many different feelings at once. There's the kiss right there that the daughter can't get to. You simultaneously, you feel like this mother is lovely, kind, even loving, but there's a distance that's baffling her children. The children aren't getting some sort of connection, and they're confused about why they're not getting that connection, right? Because they can see that right there the kiss is, but they can't get to it. That's a beautiful image to be able to give you all of those thoughts. Next slide, please. This is from Natalie Goldberg. You must become one with the details in love or hate. They become an extension of your body. Nabokov says, caress the divine details. He doesn't say jostle them in place or bang them around. Caress them, touch them tenderly, care about what is around you. That's from writing down the bones. And the next slide, this is moving down just like the summation here. So what we try to do, and again you know this, abstractions, names of ideas or concepts. which cannot in themselves be experienced directly through one of our senses. And this is key. So, of course, examples of abstractions, anything like love, imagination, hate, all these big words, all these big concepts. We like thinking in big concepts, but we don't feel necessarily in these big concepts. On the next slide, we're getting to the core of all of this. So if I just say poverty is horrible, you're going to be like, yeah, yeah. But if I show you a picture, like in the next slide, now you're going to probably feel something. Kids going through a garbage pile looking for food. Right? What you just experienced is the difference of the abstraction versus giving the image. The next one, if I said war is horrible, again, you can intellectualize that, but you're not feeling it. And when I was doing this, I was like, I'm not gonna do a real picture. I'm like, it would be too much, right? Right? So you're seeing how this is just even working on you. And the next slide here, let me do it. I love this definition of what an image is supposed to be doing. This is from Ezra Pound, and as if you remember, you know, Imagism was a movement that lasted like 2 years total with like Ezra Pound and H.D. Doolittle and Amy Lowell. And it was a reaction of modernism, of trying to do away with these big ideas and just get down to nice, clear, concrete language. But that's a movement. What he's talking about here is something else. An image is an emotional and intellectual complex in an instant of time. That's what the good image does. It gives you both emotions and thoughts that contradict, that aren't simple, right? So if I just say sweet like an orange, that's a mediocre or maybe even bad example, right? Because sweet like an orange, there's nothing complex about that. There's no thought attached to it. Are you seeing that? It's just one thing. It's just one note, sweet. We need a little bit more complexity. So in the next slide here, here's what he's talking about with getting the emotions and the intellect all working at once and offering some slight complications to it. So this is that short poem representative of the Imagist movement in a station of the metro. The apparition of these faces in the crowd, petals on a wet black bough. And so when you look at this, this is it. That's all for the poem. I'm sure you guys have seen it before. You're not quite sure how you feel. Is this positive or negative? It's leaving a subway station. And the speaker says, the apparition of these faces in the crowd, petals on a wet black bough. At first when it says petals, you're thinking, oh, that's maybe pretty. But then the wet and black and bough, how it all kind of, those sounds at the end, almost like a howl, the heavy of the bees, it doesn't sound as inviting. It almost sounds a little bit closer to death. And if we start thinking about it, if you think about like when you see a beautiful cherry tree blooming, you're not seeing those individual petals, are you? You're seeing the tree as a whole. And he's saying when these people are leaving the station, they've lost their individual identity. They're just a whole. They're there for a moment, and then they will pass away. And that's kind of what he's getting at, petals on a wet black bough. You have an emotional and intellectual complex all in an instant of time. And you get all that as a reader, and that's why this works. Versus sweet like an orange does not work. Now the next example here, this is just what I keep coming back to. This is what I check myself on in my own drafts. Whenever I give an image, I ask myself, is this one image rendering a multiplicity of ideas? And if it isn't, I edit it out. Because we're going to get the easier ones first when we're writing, but this is when the revision comes in. So if you have an image in a page, and you know when you're seeing, you know when, okay, this is the moment I need to give that visual, right? Or I need to give that oral image. You know when that happens, and you got to get it exactly right. So this is what I ask myself. Is a multiplicity of ideas being given? And if it's just one, I keep revising. So over here, next slide. This is a short poem by Beth Ann Finley, one of my favorite writers who lives in Mississippi. And the title here is going to allow the word, Gong. From the kitchen fixing her bottle, I hear it. 2 milk teeth against my beer can. Okay, it's kind of funny. So that's one of the emotions. But there's something darker to it as well. So it's gong. The title's gong. We gotta keep going back to that. So what the speaker is saying, this is a moment I realize something. So the speaker's in there fixing her bottle. We can assume this is a kid, right? And then she hears the baby 2 milk teeth. So that signifies the age of this her in the first line. The 2 milk teeth. So it's a young child. Are now the kid's crawling around, able now to reach out, grab things, and now the kid bit down on the beer can. So suddenly this mother's habits are no longer working. That's the gong. Right? She can't be drinking in the middle of the day, unless it's Mardi Gras. And just leaving her kid in the next room. The kid has reached a certain level of independence, but as a mother of a 6-year-old, this was the scariest time for me, right when my kid was completely mobile and completely stupid all at once, right? When you're having to watch everything they do because they're not, but they have no sensor at this point. So this is one of those examples. It's at first funny, but then there's a darker side to it. The milk teeth on the beer can. That's that oral image right there. That's giving that multiplicity of ideas. All right, what we got going on? So that's just repeating that, all right? Okay, writing is training your mind. Who in here has read The Lover by Marguerite Duras? I want to reread that book. Okay, so this is what she wrote. The art of seeing has to be learned. We know this, right? It is a sentiment at once poetic and practical. Cognitive science now knows that our brains invest a great deal of resources in learning to unsee and tune out irrelevant stimuli, which is why when you look closely at anything familiar, it transmogrifies into something unfamiliar. I think that's an important point. To function through life, we have to ignore so much of what is going on around us, right? Just to, when you're driving down the road, you just need to focus. I always have trouble with this when I drive from Mobile over here to Fairhope on that beautiful bridge. I just want to look out the whole time, but I will wreck if I do that, right? So you just have to keep focused so much, and that is what we do as writers. We get that luxury of stopping and being able to slow it down and re-see what's been there all around us. Okay, next slide. So here's just an example. We're going to play this little game here. So here's just a mediocre sentence. She was sitting at a table, eating her lunch, and taking sips of her drink while thinking about her day. Okay, so everything that I've underlined right here, at a table, her lunch, her drink, her day, just all, what do we call them? Lame words. they're not doing a lot of work, right? So what I want you to do right now, and we can keep it to ourselves, you don't need to share if you don't want to. I want you to rewrite this sentence by just changing what is underlined into something very specific. I want you to think of a specific person. So think of someone you know or a character that you're building. And I want you to rewrite this one. I can start with one I just did in my head right now. Oh yeah, go right ahead.
She was sitting at a 300-year-old.
And the one that I just did standing up here was, she was sitting on a bar stool eating the lunch hamburger special and taking sips of her beer while thinking about results from her mammogram. Right? So, yeah, right, so now suddenly we have a sense that the results of the mammogram weren't good. She's out drinking a beer in the middle of the day, getting the heaviest, fattiest thing that she can think of. Right, it's just, these are not nothing details. These can give us so much more sense of what's happening with our characters and who they are. All right, what do we have coming up here next? Go to the next, we'll leave it up here for a second. I just want to comment, though, on something about My own work always is trying to bring in science to what I'm doing as a way to just give it another counter or another layer. And I'm squirrely. I'm a writer. I don't want to just do what people tell me to do. So I was starting to look up what does science say about details, what happens in our minds as we read about details. And okay, it's kind of interesting. So we know about the limbic system, right? This is often considered in our brains to be what gives us emotions. The amygdala is there, right? Okay, limbic, nice little factoid, is Latin for border. So it borders the emotional part of your brain from, I guess people would call it the thinking part of your brain. Okay, the limbic system is only activated through specific details, any details that relate to one of your 5 senses. Think about that for a second. If you want to engage your reader emotionally, you have to engage their senses, is what that is telling you. So if I just say, yeah, I ate something disgusting, okay, versus I actually ate that piece of gum that was on my kid's shoe. Okay, you're going to get a different, you're going to feel that in a different way. One was telling and another I gave you the actual sense, right? And so now the part of your brain is activated. When I was looking at some of this research, one of this cognitive scientist was saying that as much as we like to pride ourselves on being thinking animals, right, we're actually emotional animals who think. And, I don't maybe like that fact about us, but his point was that our brains are like, it's almost like 2 different computer systems. One, which is the emotional side, where you have the limbic system, and the other that's the more reason side. Of course we're using them both, but it's the emotional side that comes on first. That one's fast, and it's the reason that's a little slower. So you can think about this in a couple of different ways, right? Like just for your own self, if you're driving down the road and someone cuts you off, you don't immediately reason, oh, I bet that person just didn't see me as having a bad day. No big deal. You first think, and then you can maybe tell yourself, oh, it's not a big deal, nothing happened, that person just didn't see me. I've done that many times with people too. But that's not going to be the first thought. The first thought is actually a feeling. So knowing this as writers is something that we can manipulate, for lack of a better word, right? And again, the only way to activate that limbic system, to get the tears, to get the goose flesh through eyes on people's arms, is to first do it through the 5 senses. Okay, how much time do I have? I have a little writing exercise that we could do. That'd be perfect for the writing exercise then. Okay, what if everybody brought pen and paper, right? This is the Pensters. Y'all know that. Very good, very good. Okay. So we're going to do just this little writing exercise, and I hope it's something that can be transferable to your essay that you might be working on, or your novel that you're working on, or just it might generate a new poem for you. But I call this the spectacle. The spectacle. So let me get my little sign on. So. I brought a couple of hard copies of this little writing prompt that I can leave back on that table when we all leave. But here's the first part of it. I want you to think about something odd that has happened to you. Or you can think about something odd that has happened to a character. Do you want me to read a poem to maybe give you some ideas? A quick poem? Okay. Thank you. This is a poem by Mary Oliver, and it's called The Black Snake. So this is kind of what I mean by, this is one type of spectacle. It can just be something that you've seen that just struck you as poignant, right? It maybe is not something that you've been able to even articulate to others. But here's this poem called The Black Snake. When the black snake flashed onto the morning road, and the truck could not swerve, death. That is how it happens. Now he lies looped and useless as an old bicycle tire. I stop the car and carry him into the bushes. He is as cool and gleaming as a braided whip. His is as beautiful and quiet as a dead brother. I leave him under the leaves and drive on, thinking about death, its suddenness, its terrible weight, its certain coming. Yet under reason burns a brighter fire, which the bones have already preferred. It is the story of endless good fortune. It says to oblivion, not me, it is the light at the center of every cell. It is what sent the snake coiling and flowing forward happily all spring through the green leaves before he came to the road. I love that poem. How she describes the snake as looped and useless as an old bicycle tire. That's a powerful image right there. And then when she says a braided whip, and then combining the braided whip with a good use of abstraction, I think, beautiful and quiet as a dead brother. Because we usually don't think of a braided whip as anything positive, right? And so that's a good example right there, what Pound's talking about, that emotional and intellectual combination. And then when she gets down to just, that idea of the limbic system saying to oblivion, not me, it's not going to be me who gets caught on that road as I cross it. I just love it. That sense of it is the light at the center of every cell, and what sent the snake coiling, in good verbs, coiling and flowing forward. Okay, so that would be an example of like a spectacle, something that you saw that was a little odd, okay? So the first thing to do here is just to try to brainstorm of any experiences like this that you've seen. Perhaps, a tree that comes down and you look under at the root system. Anything that's just kind of stuck in your own mind as an image that you haven't been able to let go of. Try to brainstorm, go for the lucky number 7. Try to brainstorm 7 moments. Just list them out, just real quick. 7 moments that you've seen that have left an impression on you. Their very favorite one. Okay. So the next part of this will be, with that favorite one that you circled, to just generate a list of details. So that's going to first seem easy because we're all writers. We know how to do that, right? But it's not so easy. One thing that I have started to do is this. I've borrowed from anthropologists a little bit. When they go into a new scene, they have to really train themselves to look at something without judgment, right? Because if you're an anthropologist, it's very easy for you to take your own cultural assumptions and then put that on this other culture where it may not work. So one thing that they do, which I have used in my own writing, which is really helpful, is when I'm generating details like this, I'll write on one side of the page, reactions, and the other side, specifics. And what this does is it helps give you a place for those judgment ideas, like pretty, or scary, or weird, whatever it might be. You think, is that a reaction? Or is that something that's specific, right? And so anything that's at all moving in toward the abstraction or toward the judgment, it has to go on that reaction side of the page, and we're not going to be using that. Instead, we're just looking for that pure detail that gave you that feeling. Because that pure detail that gave you that feeling, that's what you're going to use to give back to your own reader. Do you see how that's kind of working here? And so just the page set up like that, how an ethnographer would do it, I found it to be really helpful in just kind of keeping me on track when I'm just doing this generation of details. So for whatever one thing that you just circled, just try to list out, go for, again, the lucky number 7. 7 specific, concrete details. Try to even think of all the senses: taste, touch, sound, sight, and smell. try to get one specific detail for each one of those senses for this spectacle that you just chose. And then I'll tell you what we're doing next. Right, the reader wants an event themselves. When I've done this before for a poem, it's kind of fun to do the spectacle, just keep writing it out with the details, but don't try to ever explain it. Don't try to tell the reader what the meaning was, just give the reader that meaning. And then if you're more interested in prose, again, don't move into that editorializing, just give that spectacle and then move on, right? Because then it kind of leaves the reader with that same situation that the character has of what do you do next with this, right? Okay, so I'll put copies of this little writing prompt back here at the table, and I'll just end here with these final thoughts about details. Details are more than details, they are life. Who is the person you love without those details that separate him or her from another? In writing with detail, you are engaged with the world. Some writers say it's a political act, some say spiritual, others say mindfulness. Whatever the case, you are recording what is rather than what should be. You are sharing how you see the world. All right, I think we have time for one short poem of mine. This is something of a spectacle, but it's not one that I saw. This is something that I read about. Okay. So this is called Space Bears and Doxology. And when I was at a writer's residency in Costa Rica, I was finding myself homesick. So I kept reading the local news about what was going on. I'm from Knoxville, going on near the Smokies. And you'll just hear about it. It's called Space Bears and Doxology. First reports described a runaway bear wearing a space helmet. I'm not surprised. It is Tennessee, and black bears gone alien are a possibility. Here, life, not as it seems, is the hope. So after a month, wildlife rescuers tracked the scat to find a juvenile male with his head stuck in a plastic Walmart candy jar. Bulk-sized juju fruits, honey of all hives. The vet judged the bear one winter away from death, having lost half its body weight. He had learned to drink by lying down in shallow streams where the water would seep in slow enough to keep him from drowning. This story reminds me how as a child I sewed pink curtains onto roach motels, figuring they would like it better this way, both coming and going, the curtains allured an escort. And I know the bear doesn't debate about any of this. But if there were such a thing as heaven, wouldn't it be the moment the jar was removed, that rush of autumn air on his face, no barrier between paw and tongue, touch and taste, the world as it is now and ever shall be, suddenly right before him, rubbing cheeks with sun on autumn mornings, and if he's lucky, pricking his eyes with a sting of sleet come winter. Thank you all. I'm going to go take my seat and listen to what's happening next.
Oh, okay. She was reading, Charlotte was reading from this book, which she has a few back there to $12. And then she also brought this book, which is $8. So, you know, we can help support. Although I don't think you brought a lot, did you, Charlotte?
Oh, I've got a box.
Oh, she's got it. She was thinking positively. things. Number one,